particularly here at OTS, but to give you some background, I actually was a training manager, which is a 3S2 on the enlisted side. And I had to drag people through passing their 5-level CDCs. And for those of you who are non-prior, your enlisted people go away to their tech school. They're given a certain amount of knowledge, and then we expect them to expand upon it. And in order to prove that they're competent at their skills, they actually really are expected to pass these additional CDCs. When they're passing these, it's a standard multiple choice question test, but there's a lot of stress on people. If you don't pass it, a lot of times the Air Force will say, thanks for playing, you're going to a different job. So I had to figure out a way a long time ago on how to get people to be more successful at passing their tests. So those of you, some of you are just joining us, if you want to turn off your video to save bandwidth, I am recording this and I will be giving it to you guys in your group pages on Canvas. All right, so that's me. That's me in a nutshell on why this matters to me so much. And we are going to begin with this presentation here. So. Looks like I'm going to have a little bit of problem with changing pages here. So let me figure this out. There we are. Okay. In preparation for the test, we're going to do the whole overview for you, getting ready for the exam, the mechanics of the test itself. Now, forgive me, I wrote this test a little bit ago, and make sure you check with your AO on the very specifics of how much time you're allotted. Sometimes it was 80 minutes, sometimes it's 70 minutes. So if there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, don't get mad at me. I've warned you on the front end that there could be a little bit of wiggle room. What to expect on test day, and then these test taking strategies are super, super relevant to you. So here we go. It's supposed to be in presenter mode. What happened to it? Some slideshow. There it is. Okay, so preparing for the test day. Obviously, your attending behaviors during lectures is going to be strained here in this electronic environment. If you are not doing well with this modality, and quite frankly, I had a real tough day even getting ready for work today, simply because all of this blue light interface from our screens and stuff is starting to really affect me. I recommend the kind of see one, do one, teach one, which is a very Air Force training concept. What I would like for you to do is ask your roommate to teach you the lesson back as you learned it today. That'll reinforce learning for both of you, and it'll kind of undo a little bit of this electronic environment. When you are listening to us, though, listen for some cues from your instructor. No kidding, I have been very frank with a lot of you about kind of like, hey, understand that you may have to read a paragraph and figure out what the team, what phase of team building the team is in. So if we as instructors are giving you cues, honestly, like pay attention to those and then discuss them with your flight mates about what kind of relevant takeaways you think we are giving you. Pay close attention to these illustrations, graphs, and just pictures displayed. One of the main reasons for this is because a good test taking strategy that should kind of alleviate some of your own personal anguish is to draw some of those things. Like, go ahead and draw a COGS ladder with that team building. Go ahead and draw what you'll get later today with Kelly's two-dimensional model of followership. It might not necessarily help you, but it could be that visual cue for helping you to answer some of the questions later. And you could probably do something with that nervous energy a little bit anyway. So pay close attention to these graphs and illustrations, and you potentially could be using them and definitely benefiting from them. So us as instructors, we really do try and set you guys up for success. Believe you me, I am not the kind of person that's literally teaching you the test. That's not how I work, but it doesn't mean that I want to turn this into some kind of game. Every one of you has proven yourself in college and with mentors. You deserve to be here. And the academic assessment is really, it meets the Air Force's requirements and the metrics in the syllabus. But every one of you have the potential to be successful at this. So getting involved in study groups actually can increase your retention by 30%. So a lot of you are like, I like to study on my own. And I get that. Don't get me wrong. I get that. The problem is if you are learning something and you're learning it wrong, all you're doing is reinforcing misinformation. Where if you are in a group and you are an auditory learner, now maybe you're hearing someone else's voice besides yourself. If you're not a true visual learner and practically have an eidetic memory with regard to reading material, studying by yourself is almost never beneficial. You can practice in these groups that see one, do one, teach one. Hey, there's an area that I don't understand very well. I want to try teaching it to everybody else so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And it turns out that when you're the teacher, you actually have to know the material way better than the recipient anyway. So in your study groups, try all kinds of different ways to engage yourself and to participate differently, because it activates all of those different learning centers depending on what kind of learner you are. So here we are, the nuts and bolts of what to expect at OTS. These are your samples of behavior. Now, what's really important to understand, and I'm going to bring you to Bloom's taxonomy in a moment, is that the level we are asking from you at OTS is not apply or discern or extrapolate. It's very low level learning. It's remember and understand, almost regurgitate. So recognize that if we are asking you certain terms like state, define, or list, these are those rote memorization and knowledge requirements. If we go up a little bit and we're asking you to identify, predict, describe something that's a higher level of learning, it's not really that high a level of learning any more than, like I said, there's a group of people performing. Here's some characteristics they're displaying. What level of team building are they? Okay, so you'll see how some of the different styles of questions differ when I go into showing you some retired questions. What I need you to remember is to study to the learning level of those SOBs. Trainees have this innate ability to try and read into the questions. Don't do it, okay? So here we are at this Bloom's taxonomy. It's changed a little bit, but in general, knowledge and remember, still the same idea. Comprehension and understanding, still the same idea. Applying, up here, they've decided that synthesis and evaluation are higher levels. We're not asking you to do much of this on the pure academic level. As an officer, I absolutely do need you to create and to evaluate and to synthesize. And some of your leadership things, we're going to ask you about those second and third order effects. But when it comes to studying for this test, literally, it's these bottom two tiers at remember and understand. So only study to that level. This is kind of a little bit of a eye chart, but you guys will have access to this slideshow. So you can see some of the keywords that show you those lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. If they need you to remember, they're going to say things like find, identify, locate, listen, observe, repeat. So the questions are going to be very similar in that level of learning. When it comes to preparing for the test, I recommend that you review something every night. And you also, to notice the last line, should study in 15-minute blocks to stay present and engaged. If you're trying to do marathon studying, chances are you're not going to be very effective. Your brain just doesn't work that way. For some of you, I'm eventually going to show you System 1 and System 2 thinking. If you're not engaging your System 2 brain with this learning, then you're probably wasting your time, quite frankly. So review a little bit every night and keep adding the material, even though you think you have the old material. And one of the reasons why is because, okay, I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm truly biased. I love the material at OTS. For example, I was listening to Captain Meade talk about change management, and I was like thinking to myself and raising my hand. I was like, I really want to talk about how this relates to team building. Like, is change management more difficult if you can't ascertain where your team is on the team building model, right? On Cog's ladder. You can see that if you start to apply some of this stuff in these lessons as they intertwine into one another, now it's not really rote memorization anymore. It's a lot more cognitive as you apply these to some of those, oh, I think I remember this scenario, and you're going to do a much better job of learning. So go ahead and study a little bit from everything every night. And in doing that, you're going to create like your building blocks of information. Use these 3 R's, read, recite, and review. This is especially important for some of you auditory learners. You really should read to yourself out loud or have your roommate read along something and then follow along with your eyes and your finger. All of these learning centers are really difficult to engage. And a lot of you, unfortunately, you got all the way through college and still don't really know what kind of learner you are. So try and make sure you're engaging yourself on every level so you can kind of figure out which one is most effective for you. Some of you love cognitive strategies for learning, like some of those like little acronyms and stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. I still use this one. Be my little general, brigadier, major, lieutenant, general. Got it, got it. Some of them are not necessarily helpful. I taught Eat Tasty Pie yesterday, and quite frankly, all I can remember is pie, and I think about the pecan pie that they don't have at the DFAC, but it's gonna take a lot more for me to remember that Eat Tasty Pie is the empowerment part, the teamwork, and someone help me remember what the P was. Oh, darn it. There we go. That's why some of these don't really work for everybody. But again, try and use all of your learning centers if you really can. Drawing those lessons and those graphic models definitely should help you, especially if you're a tactile learner, because the actual act of drawing is helpful. Now, that being said, if you find yourself being a tactile learner, typing flashcards is not the same as writing them. You will be much better for having written out those flashcards as opposed to typing them. So I was a paramedic for about 15 years. And what's very interesting is if I wrote down someone's social security number, date of birth, and their medicines, I could remember it for 2 hours. But I couldn't even remember the doctor's number when I was calling in a radio call. He would say, Dr. 46, go. By the time I was done talking to him, I couldn't even remember the number that he had given me. Why? Because I didn't write it down. I clearly figured out what kind of learner I was. So here we are, we're preparing for the test. We have done some studying, we studied at regular intervals. We didn't do any of this marathon studying. In fact, we found some ways to do something like study for a few minutes and then roll some socks, and study for a few minutes and then go wash my face. We're studying without distractions as much as possible. And if we are going to engage with the person next to us, we are going to definitely try and use all of those modalities for all of your learning centers. Reading, like I said, reading that material aloud is very helpful. Building those flashcards and then getting that study buddy to help you. All of these can actually improve your retention by at least 30%. Whew. So we've done it. We've studied in these little sessions. We looked at how big cram sessions are not going to be helpful. We're going to avoid trying reviewing too much right before the test. So that's oftentimes when we create confusion for ourselves because we're already anxious. So just kind of simmer down those serotonin levels and whatnot, and just kind of USA on your way into this test. Study the night before, and get a good night's sleep. The test itself is all multiple choice. This will not change. You're not going to suddenly be given a short answer or an essay question. This is OTS. This has been like this since before I got here 12 years ago. And to tell you the truth, Sean P. Locklear, our guru of testing, was here when I was here at OTS. So this is what to expect. There are 50 questions on each, test 1 and test 2. When you've been told that you need an 80% on both of these tests, that does mean that you could get a 76 on test 1 and get an 84 on test 2, and whew, you can actually pass OTS. Don't rest on your laurels, though, of getting a 96 on that first test and thinking there's no way you can fail by not doing well on test 2, because I've seen people getting caught up into their like wing level leadership programs, and they literally have failed the second test, and then they needed to take the third one, which was cumulative. Now, just to help you understand this, test 1 is on all of the material up into test 2. Don't flush that, but test 2 is only on the material from test 1 to test 2. They're separate. They're not comprehensive. However, if you need to, or they're not accumulative, they're comprehensive. If you need to take the third one, that one actually is an accumulative examination. Now, this time, I'm not sure if it's still 75 minutes. It might be 80. Don't massacre me over this one. The whole point is you have about a minute and a half per question on average. You should set yourself some achievable goals. Like, I plan on reading over the whole test in the first 5 minutes just to kind of gauge my level of expectations, or, you know, figure out how many of these areas I might have to spend more energy on. Like, I don't really remember that leader development course. let me make sure I have time for that. You may or may not reread the test or read the test in advance. That's up to you. The whole point of this is, though, you need to set some goals. Like, there's 2 scantrons, and I have to fill out both scantrons. All that bubbling may seem like it doesn't take very much time, but if you leave it to the last minute, you will run out of time. So make sure you are giving yourself that last 10 or 20 minutes inside of this to review your answers, to double check that 10 is actually 10, and you didn't somehow skip a bubble, and now 10 meant to be 11, 12 meant to be 10 meant to be 11, and 11 meant to be 12. You know what I mean? We're off by 1, right? That would be awful. I also think it's a good idea to double check your Scantron like every 10 questions or so to make sure that you're on track. You're going to have a yellow sheet that is all yours to write on, and a Scantron. They're both bubble sheets. I would make little annotations next to those every 10 to remind myself to go back and make sure I am where I want to be. Do not write in your test booklet. Don't write on the Scantron in erroneous ways that the machine will go cattywampus, but that yellow sheet is all yours. The questions are written as to clue you into a specific lecture. So if something is leading you in the followership model, know that that's probably what the material is about. It's not going to be about something else that you weren't prepared for. Don't try and extrapolate or cross over. Now, I said a lot of this material intertwines, but the SOBs stand on their own, okay? And we will not have any questions on the test that did not come from an SOB, period, end of discussion. And I have seen these tests and all of the reviews and analysis that go on to this. They know what's the high miss questions. They know if the question is going to be a high miss, what distractor people usually take. There's a lot of analytics that go into testing here. There is a review board that meets after each one, and that's where the official results come from. But your yellow Scantron or your yellow sheet to scratch paper, you'll go over that with your instructor. So you'll kind of have a rough idea of what score you got basically at the end of the review period. Now, my non-native English speakers, I am very passionate about this. You have probably, I think, till the end of today for Captain Eaton to know which of you are non-native English speakers. Recognize that admitting to that is not a weakness. In fact, the majority of us wish we could speak 2 languages, and we think it's remarkable that you're able to be here and participate with us. You are entitled to 30 extra minutes of time in your testing and a dictionary. Well, actually, it's dictionary.com right now. But you should take that. Be honest with yourself about your comprehension skills, because many of you are reading the question, translating it to your native language, answering the question, and translating it back. Most of us who don't speak multiple languages have no idea how actual time consuming that is. Now, some of you may not still be in that space, but if you are, if you dream in your native language, your subconscious, and for that matter, your learning is still driven primarily by your native language. And that might seem a little hokey for you, some of us, but when you think about it, you recognize I'm probably right. So by all means, I applaud you for taking the courage to admit that you are a non-native English speaker and could use the rest of the time. And the rest of us need to give them that grace. Okay, that's how we get diversity in our organization. And we can talk offline if you disagree with me. All right, test day. Here it is. You ate a good breakfast. You're gonna feed the brain a little bit. You get up early. Usha, do some grounding stuff, a little yoga. Get your mind in the right place. Glance over your notes, but don't get crazy deep into it. Avoid really deep conversations about the subject matter. Studying was all the way up until test day. All right. Here we are. Test day. Trainees love to read into the questions. You're going to be like, well, but there's a program out there that if they were doing a really good job, they would know to go get these coats and tell logistics. Stop it. Stop. Stop reading into the question. Just go with what's there. Okay. The best answer is the best answer in Air Force tests, because the other ones called distractors are meant to be distractors. They're really oftentimes very good, plausible answer choices. So it's your job to know the material well enough to pick the best answer. Some of you are very guilty of this. You'll like to go in and change your answers. Do not change an answer unless you find something that absolutely proves to you that you've chosen the wrong answer, or unless it was one of those calculations of 10 meant to be 11, whatever. Don't second guess yourself. Most of the time you are right on the first time, okay? There are people who have a lot of little philosophies. You are not going to hear me tell you things like it's too long to be wrong. No. I don't know where some of these misnomers come from. These are not from good test takers. I am a very good test taker. I would never discount an answer just because it's longer than the rest of them. Also, I would never discount a question that says never, because honestly, sometimes the right answer is never, or sometimes the right answer is always. Go with the material. Know what the material was given to you and understand how to utilize the information given to you to the best of your ability. I'm looking for a power cord, y'all. So when you're looking at these answer choices, the truth of it is they are distractors. They are distractors for a reason. You should maybe figure out why some of the answers aren't a good choice or why some of them are better than others, which brings us to my very best test taking techniques. Drum roll, please. Here we are. The majority of you are going to want to read the question first, okay? And people are like, read the question first and hide your answers. And then with the answers there, it's going to jump off the page at you. Okay, well, that's all well and good and all, except that if you're like, oh yeah, I got this question, the answer is jelly beans. And then you get to that place to look at the answers and jelly beans isn't there, you truly set yourself up for test anxiety that you wouldn't previously had. I don't think it's necessary. I don't recommend it. So instead of doing that, I really want you to try something, and this is different. And nurses get me because the nursing corps, and actually institutionally, nurses in general in all colleges, have started really recommending in their test taking to read the answer choices first. I am a big proponent of this. However, it is time consuming. If you read the answer choices first, and the first one says apple, oranges, grapes, and the next one says apple, oranges, grapefruit, oh man, look, there's a distinction there. And if I was rushing, I might have picked one over the other. This way, I can make sure that I don't. So here we go. We're going to give this a shot, and we're going to try my philosophy. Okay? Here we are. If we read the answer choices first, we can find differences and similarities. Something like, these two answer choices seem very much like squadron level responsibilities. Oh, these two answer choices seem more like wing level or MAGCOM. That's interesting. So you're going to look for these kinds of similarities and differences, those specific words, the broad concepts, some hierarchies, some frequencies, some quantities. All of these things matter in the answer choices. Now, there's some questions on this test, and I have been accused before of people deciding that the word inside here had to match the word inside the question and the answer. Like it had to match, so I picked that one even though I thought it might be wrong. Okay, guys. While these are some great test-taking tips, they're not forever true, or they're not absolutes. If something in the question doesn't match the choice that was kind of the most obvious, look for the one, again, that is the best Air Force answer. All right, so look for material inside these answer choices that you absolutely never covered. That is why they're called distractors. Or if it's just simply contrary to what you recall. You're like, it says never, but I remember that being an always. Okay. That's the point. Look for some of those absolute adverbs. They may or may not be helpful to you, but they actually should at least make you raise your eyebrow. And that's okay. See if you can ascertain what the question might actually be based on the answer choices. And one of the examples I'm going to give you, you can totally see by the answer choices, you can guess what the question would have been. All right. So here is just a bunch of stuff. I need OT Pratt to come online and just read A and then B and then C and then D for me real quick. Can you do that, ma'am? Oh, please.
Just unmute, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. All I have is Nick. I didn't have Nicholas. I'm sorry. I apologize to you.
Ma'am, I can read them. Sure. This is OT Rocket. OT classroom. So A, security, medical readiness, airfield management, family service groups. B, maintenance, mission support, medical and operations groups. C, logistics, transportation, medical and readiness groups, and D, supply, personnel, finance, and medical groups.
All right. So I imagine at this point, some of you are going, some of these words, like she said, are repeated inside of here. Some of these other words are very, very specific. Some of these words are really broad. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually spend several slides looking at just these answer choices. Okay. Here we are. Something in common with all the options. The word medical, 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 medical showed up in all four of them. Fascinating, right? However, one of those says medical group, one of them says medical readiness, so there are some small distinctions. Now, can we group anything? Security, medical readiness, airfield management. Boy, those are really specific, aren't they? Maintenance, mission support, medical, operations group. Those are really very all-encompassing. Right? And if you have to ask yourself, I wonder what the operations group does, clearly it's a very broad thing, right? Now we have logistics, transportation. Transportation seems a little specific. So does logistics. Medical, no, that's kind of in the big broad one. Readiness. Now before medical and readiness were together and now they seem separate because of where the comma and the and is. I don't know. I'm just going to take note of this. I'm not making any decisions yet. And then in D, finance is real specific. In fact, most of you guys, even if you're non-priors, probably recognize that finance is a portion of personnel. So that answer belongs in something inside of the other answer, right? Okay, here we go. Now, is there anything that is a synonym or, like I said, creates those relationships? Yeah, transportation actually does fall under logistics. Personnel and supply and finance and logistics and supply, aren't those almost the same word? I mean, in military speak, they kind of are. So does that make them different enough for me to choose one of those as my answer choices? All right, we've analyzed this thing quite a lot. Now, here's the question itself. Which of the following four groups are found in a typical Air Force wing? How many of you are thinking and anticipating this is probably what the question would look like, right? Okay, so read it twice, and I want you to look for keywords or groups, okay? Four groups. So if any of these answer choices had 3 or 5, it would be wrong, right? Just by virtue of clever test taking skills. Now, I will warn you though, the Air Force people here do a really good job and all of your answer choices are pretty much going to fall in line with what they say they're going to. So that one's more of a high school level tip for your younger siblings or not going to help you a lot on an Air Force test. But 4 groups and the word group. And then I have only been in the Air Force a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that a wing is very top level and a wing is made up of groups, just like a group is made up of squadrons. So now I'm seeing the hierarchical relationship. All right, now I understand the question more clearly. I'm gonna go look at these ones again. All right, I have 77 people in here. No one's raising their hand. I want you to raise your hand if you think the answer is A. Is that one too specific for all of you guys? All right. How many of you think it's B? I'm getting some hands. Woo! Look at all these hands. I got like 33 hands, 37, 40. All of you guys are thinking this is B. Well, why is that? Because the word group and underneath something as large as wing is not very specific. It's kind of a broad concept. So we look at the last two just to make sure we're not tricking ourselves. Logistics, transportation, medical, and readiness. No, I'm pretty sure that all of those are subordinate to something else, just like D is. So it was pretty easy just when we looked at those answer choices to ascertain what the question probably was going to be. And this entire group of students did a rock star job on that. So yes, the answer on this one is B. So let's look at another one. I am now interested in, you guys can lower your hands because that was crazy effective. And I want to have a resetted thing for hand raising. All right. This here says provide citizen airmen to defend the United States and protect its interests through air and space power. There's a lot of words in that one sentence. It's longer than the rest. That doesn't mean I want you to pick that one because it's too long to be wrong, okay? Provide primary force of combat power to America's warfighting commands. C, defend the United States through the control and exploitation of space. That's interesting. That one only says space. Just picking on some stuff here. Recruit, train, and educate airmen to deliver air power for America. That's pretty specific too, don't you think? All right, let's see what happens if we start pulling these apart. Occasionally, I like to look for verbs. Like, what is the action of all? These all clearly do look like a kind of a mission or an objective, right? It's just because of the action words that they're using on the front end. So provide and provide, defend, and then recruit, train, and educate. Okay, some of these are starting to seem a little bit more like tactical level. The individual stuff, some of these are very doctrinal concepts. So let's see what happens if we move on a little bit. All right, how about we look at the subject noun? Because sometimes when these sentences are that long, I want to compare apples and apples and apples and oranges. United States and its interests, because there's actually two subject nouns in that one. America's war-fighting commands. Oh man, if I hadn't paid attention, I wouldn't have even seen that the word command was the subject noun here. Defend the United States. Okay, that one's kind of similar to A, isn't it? And then for America. All right. So if we look at all of these subject nouns, the recipients of those verbs, we are going to see that there are about 3 that all represent America, and one stands out representing the America's commands. Okay, try some more looking at these in different lenses. The object noun. We knew that it was kind of an objective or something that they were going to perform. Now, who are they doing it to? Citizen airmen, or they're doing it to the combat power, or they're doing it to the space, or they're doing it to airmen again. Okay, so 2 of those bigger ones that were almost hard to find the object noun are actually missions, right? They're going to provide primary force of combat power, control and exploitation of space. I bet until we started looking at the grammar of these answers didn't seem so very different or quite so groupable, but they really are. All right, so here's the question. Now forgive me, because this one, literally the answer is in the question. That's great, because some of these ones you don't have time to put all of this application into of reading the answer choices first. But I use this one because all of those answer choices were very good at separating those different concepts I wanted to share. But the question, select the mission of the Air Education and Training Command. Boy, I bet you I should be having some hand raised now. We read this twice. We look for the word mission, and we know what the actual subject of this is, right? Whew. All right. Who in here thinks it's A? Do I have hands raised for A? Nobody? Or where's my hands? I got hands somewhere. I got someone's hand up. How about B? Do we like B for this answer? C? How about D? D's a good answer for this one? Boom. Yeah, my computer's blowing up again. You guys are crushing this. Okay. I know that this is one of those ones that, yes, jumped off the table, off the paper for you. But understand how important it is to be able to look at those answer choices. Because what if it didn't say that? What if it was to talk about something else and it was one of those other answer choices? Being able to discern and subgroup and compare is a really important skill. All right. Let's see. I have another one. And believe you me, before we're done, I'm even going to give you guys a scenario, because I do know that we have some scenario-based questions, and I want you to feel completely capable of taking this Air Force test. I'm hoping, it is my true hope, that in doing this, I will have given you guys some ideas on how to study more effectively for your learning style. And I'm also hoping that you see the merit in just taking a test differently. Ultimately, when I've given trainees tests and they failed the first time, and I ask them if they tried my measure of reading the answer choices first, they usually don't. They're like, I've been taking tests and I know how I take tests. And then when I humble them a little bit and I say, well, if you could try my way, let's see if you do better, I usually get pretty good feedback that this is effective. So it's not exactly a one-size-fits-all tool, and like I said, you can't use it for every single question. But I'm really confident that this could help some of you, especially for some of the questions that you're like, ding dang, I don't even know where to begin with this one. Okay. So here's another one. We're going to look at this. You know what? Let's see. Find me OT Kirsch. Can you read A, B, and C for me, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent.
A describes the proper employment of specific Air Force assets/weapon systems. B states the most fundamental and enduring beliefs that describe and guide the proper use of air and space forces. Or C describes how to organize the military forces, and it applies the principle of basic doctrine to our military actions.
Wow, that kind of, if anybody else is picking up on some of these things, very specific, very broad, very doctrinal. You know what? I'm going to see if someone, I'm going to give you guys a moment to look at this slide and see if you want to walk me through this slide. Let's see if if you guys all lower your hands, If anybody was to raise their hands for me, who thinks they could walk me through this slide using my modality? Let's see here. OT Van Winkle, you're an AO. I want you to understand these concepts really well. Do you want to walk everybody through this slide the way I've kind of shared it with you guys?
Sure, ma'am. I could do that.
Sure, give it a try.
You just to go over the slide?
Yeah, I mean, at the top I have the action, so kind of
like we have A.
You know what? I'm not really sure of the bandwidth from where you are. I think we might be having some difficulty with hearing you. So let me try one more time with OT Martini. And if this doesn't work, I think I'll just continue being the presenter because I do know that I am recording this for you guys. So OT Martini, thank you, OT Van Winkle, for giving it a shot, but your bandwidth was making you real digital. OT Martini, can you walk through this slide?
Sure, ma'am. Just want to verify, can everybody hear me okay before I start?
I can, okay? And since I'm all on Wi-Fi, I'm hoping everybody else can too.
Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. So good. I'm looking at this. Describes, obviously it's in red, so we all know to look at that right now. To me, right away, that says, okay, so something's being described. So what describes? So it's almost like blank describes the proper employment of specific Air Force assets and weapons. So right there, I'm thinking, okay, this might be something that would be used on an operational level, maybe like in a wartime thing, maybe almost like a rules of engagement type like thing. States the most fundamental and enduring beliefs that describe and guide the proper use of air and space forces. So right there, I'm thinking like fundamental and enduring beliefs that might be like a code of conduct or something to that nature.
Very big scope, right? Like doctrinal.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, doctrine, right? Or code or rules of engagement.
Yeah.
C describes how to organize the military forces, and it applies the principles of basic doctrine to military actions. So that one, similar, describes, so it's almost like what describes how to organize the military forces. So it's like, sounds like a code again, or like a rule or an ethic, right, that we use to
so
kind of
there was an answer
do
D,
things.
Right, and if there was an answer D on here, and then all of a sudden it said establishes, that would stick out, wouldn't it? Because like describes is more of like, you know, like you expect something to follow, where established is more like a law. Right? So look how there might be some differences in some of these. All right, let's go to some more of who they're talking about. Let me see if I can find some more hands of people that are interested in walking me through these who's. What do I have here? Nobody? Nobody? OT Teague, are you ready to walk me through this? Oh, you know what? We have a guest over here from 214. That's fabulous. Jesse Wilson, will you talk to us about these subject nouns?
Yes, ma'am. I'll give it a shot.
And so we can hear you, sir.
You can hear me? Yes, thank you. So there's 3 subject nouns. They're all of, so they're all the same. And that doesn't. But the placement in the answer kind of helps us decide what it's trying to describe, like employment of versus use of versus the principles of.
Well, and that word of tells us who it's happening to, right? So it's kind of one of those, like, if we're not great at grammar and I don't really know what a prepositional phrase is, at least if I were to find an of, probably the word after it would be my subject noun, like who the action's happening to, correct?
Yes, that is what a subject noun is, correct.
Thanks. So what did you distinguish between these subject nouns? What sticks out to you?
I'm sorry, man. Can you please repeat that?
What can you discern about these subject nouns? What sticks out to you about the difference between assets and weapons, air and space forces, and doctrine? How do those, you know what I mean, like in your mind, describe what those are to you?
Air Force assets and weapon systems is more of like physical things. Air and space force is very, very broad. And the basic doctrine is written stuff or text that can be broad. But it says basic doctrine, so it's probably very broad.
Yeah, and it's almost intangible, right? Doctrine is almost like a concept where, like you said, assets and weapons is really like, I could touch those, right? So, all right, let's move on. See what else we find in here. Who wants to help me out a little bit with looking at the object nouns here? Like, what are they trying to do here? Who is Daniel Long? I have a guest from 112. You didn't raise your hand. Do you think you could help me, though? Look at these object nouns.
Ma'am, I don't know how well my mic is going to come through on this.
Ooh, it sounds fabulous.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're looking at nouns, correct?
Sure. And on this one, it's the actual object noun. So it's going to help us, again, to discern.
Sorry, 1 second, ma'am. Okay. So if we're looking at nouns, most fundamental and enduring beliefs. So, describe the proper employment. So you can look at them in the way that the nouns are employed. So one is going to be specific or weapons and assets. I know it's right there in the question, but it's going to refer back to, I'm sorry, it's right there in the answer, but it's going to refer back to the question. So for instance, if we're talking about a fundamental and enduring belief, then we know that's going to be more of a guiding principle as opposed to something that's really specific, like a weapon system.
Perfect.
And then organizationally, answer C is going to tell us more organizationally about like an organizing principle. So really, that's going to narrow down the type of answers we should be pulling out of the question that we'll eventually get.
Right. And while none of our distractors are really bad, if you are taking a test, though, and something doesn't really have like agreement with regard to like this thing's very intangible, it's conceptual, but the other words in there are like very tactical or, something that you can touch or feel, or if some of this stuff just doesn't agree, you should be paying attention to that. So I would like to believe that almost everybody here could probably anticipate kind of where we're going with this answer, because one of the questions I have down here, do these terms represent any hierarchy that sounds familiar? As you're starting to look at these things, some of these don't even talk about air and space forces. One of them talks about organized military forces, which we could even infer is like, do they mean Army and Marines and Navy? Because I didn't see my service mentioned in that question, that answer choice at all, right? So anybody here, go ahead and raise your hand. Who's starting to think that this is very like hierarchical? You can kind of imagine where these sentences would be employed on what level, like an asset or weapon system. That could just be a battery of tank people, or for the Air Force, it could just be one plane, right? All right, so let's go on and see what happens. Here's the question. Here's the actual question. Which of the following best defines tactical doctrine? And I don't want you guys to get confused, because that word doctrine, like I said, was very conceptual. But the word that really means something here, that key word or the root, is the word tactical. So given that, which of these do we think is the right answer choice? All right, raise your hands. Is it A? We're at 7, 9, 11, 15. So we're hanging out in the 20, 23, 24. People think it might be one of the other choices. So I got about a third of you thinking that it is A. All right, are there people who think it's B? Go ahead and lower your hands so I can restart here. Anybody thinking this is B? No, not so much. Anybody think it's C? About 20 of you think it's C. So we're a little bit split on this. And here's what happened to this one. So because you guys saw in here the term basic doctrine, you guys got wrapped around doctrine matches doctrine. Like these two words have to match each other because you were looking for some kind of agreement between the answer choice and the question. When I need you actually to focus on the concept of tactical. So those of you who answered answer choice A, that is the correct one because tactical, and we're going to talk about this more as you guys go through in the levels of leadership. When we say you're being too tactical, you're in the weeds. I want you to consider that tactical, operational, and strategic level learning and understanding here is like a tank. An Abrams tank is on the ground being tactical. That is a very specific weapon system, right? But if the Abrams tank needed some help, it might ask for something that can see from a little higher level, and that's operational, which is a little bit more about the air and space forces, right? That you can even see by the virtue of these answer choices that they're kind of coming away from the nitty gritty. A weapon system itself is very specific in its job, and that is tactical. If you are looking at handling more assets at one time, that is operational. And if you're looking at being able to handle all of the organizations, that is where you start to get your strategic level doctrine. So you guys kind of got caught up on the word doctrine, but you needed to focus on the word tactical. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on this one specifically?
Ma'am, can you repeat what you just said in regards to tactical, operational, and strategic?
Okay, so
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, let's figure out. So these questions actually are exactly examples of those 3 levels of leadership. Okay, let's see. Someone answer for me. Just pop on with your mic because enough of you will have the right answer. It's fine. What level of leadership is the DOD, the Pentagon, the President of the United States, the Senate? What level of leadership is that? Are they making decisions on whether or not I can buy pencils and paper? Right? What level of leadership is that?
Strategic, ma'am.
Right. And so when you think about the definition of strategic, you're thinking about the principles of basic doctrine to military actions, to organize the military forces. So it's not any one system, it's not any one organization, it's all of them. And that's why C is a very strategic level answer. When you look at B, if I were, if I'm the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? I'm at that level very strategic. But if I tell the Air Force guy, hey, you've got some problems with personnel and I need you to go figure those out, he's going to go to his personnel people inside the Air Force and he's going to start looking at those kinds of problems. So when you see something that's specific, like the proper use of air and space forces, but it's not exactly the put a bomb on a warhead on a forehead level, that's where that's operational. Does that make sense? So now when we get to A, which is tactical, how I put a bomb on a target is very specific to that weapon system, and that is your tactical leaders. So you wouldn't have General Schwarzkopf in the AOR back in Desert Storm. You wouldn't have him telling an F-16 pilot how and where to drop his bomb. That's a very tactical level thing. So that's starting to make a little bit of sense.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so it wasn't my intent to actually cover the lesson or the material, but I do need you guys to start at least a little bit thinking about broader Air Force concepts. And we do teach you guys about doctrine and we do teach you about levels of learning or levels of leadership. So if you're looking for the wrong word in these questions, it's going to lead you astray. And so like in this one in particular, if you were looking for doctrine, you were going to answer choice C. But what you needed to be looking for is the definition. Remember, in Bloom's Bloom's taxonomy, you need to look for defines tactical doctrine. Does that make sense? A lot of you are overthinking it and you weren't really looking for your root word. So those of you who chose A, I'm hoping that's kind of where it came together for you. And those of you who chose C, I am hoping that you can kind of understand that words matter in these questions and how they're written and why you want to discern the difference in the answer choices. Because if I rushed to just reading the question, which of the following best defines tactical doctrine, and I was in a hurry, I would absolutely choose C because I didn't distinguish the differences between all of these answer choices. Okay, I think you guys are going to be wildly effective at this once you start to get the hang of it. So I'm going to offer the opportunity to do a scenario. I'm pumped. You guys were waiting for this one, right? Scenarios probably matters more than any of the other ones to you guys. All right, this one here. We just covered this lesson. This, what is it? Someone tell me, what does this lesson apply to? O.T. Langle, what is this a lesson? We just covered it. What lesson was this? No? Nobody? Anybody? We covered a lesson that at least some of this.
Ma'am.
Problem solving is in this, but there's more answers that are effective with another lesson. And that's one of the things I want you guys to realize is that the questions come from a very specific lecture. They're not from multiple lectures. This lecture, you can look at these answer choices and know which lecture this came from. Anybody else have a different answer besides problem solving?
Leadership development.
Leadership.
No one sees core values in this? Courage, commitment.
Core values.
Nice, thanks. I know some of these are hard to know a whole lot about, but once we go into this a little bit deeper, and we see the scenario itself, you'll really hone in on this one for me. A little early, maybe I was a little ambitious, expecting that you guys would see core values in this, but that's okay. We're going to look at these answer choices. There it is, courage. It shows up in 2 of them. Might not be noteworthy at this point, but it may help me choose the difference between A and D if courage is where I'm really headed. Okay, so no problem there. Sometimes the best thing you can do is look at your answer choices and give yourself your own little definition as you learned it. Courage, speaking truth to power, acting on what's right. That's my own little personal definition as I go through. I'll make a little definition for decision making. The process of gathering information, identifying and choosing among the alternatives, and then taking the best action using that judgment. Okay, problem solving. Similar to decision making, it's a little bit more analytic and it may or may not include action. So just kind of think about when you look at these and they're similar, how are they different from one another? All right, commitment. Oh, it's easy. Dedication to a cause. Every single one of you is committed to being here. You got that one on lock. All right, communication skills. Ability to convey information effectively. And don't just think it's verbal, because it could be written and nonverbal. Flexibility. Willingness to change, adapt, compromise. I'm feeling like you guys could all agree with me on some of these definitions, and I didn't have to pull them out of Merriam-Webster, right? How about organizational understanding? The working structure, culture, climate, and interoperability of the subgroups. Kind of like the last question, right? Okay, so this is my understanding of these words. Yeah, I'm ready to move on. Note that some of those are very similar, and that could send me astray if I'm not careful. But fortunately for me, it doesn't say courage and decision making, courage and problem solving, so it may make it easier to make a decision. All right, let's read the scenario. Someone raise their hand, read my scenario. Who do I have? Who do I have? No hands? Oh, there it is. Carlin Kurtik. O.T. Kurtik?
Lieutenant Kurtik here, ma'am.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Read my scenario. Nice and proud.
Colonel King tells Second Lieutenant Newby that his team no longer needs to track projected inbound personnel. Lieutenant Newby replies, "Sir, I am concerned that if we don't track projected inbound personnel and report totals to the equipment issue team, they won't know to order cold weather gear for them." The colonel pauses, then nods his head and says, "You're right. I hadn't considered the impact to other sections. Please continue to track the numbers." Good catch, Lieutenant Newby. Identify all the people involved.
All right. You want to do that? You want to identify? How are you, ma'am? No. I was in fact, in this lesson, I was just making sure they understood the distinction. And so they all know that they have to report that to you by today. Thank you, ma'am. Got it. Thanks. Okay.
Was that directed to me, ma'am?
No, I apologize. So who are the people involved?
Is that question directed to me or the group?
You can answer it because you already have a live mic.
Colonel King, Second Lieutenant Newby, and then all of the other teams involved that they're considering.
Yeah, kind of in a supporting role, right?
Yes.
For the most part. Now, once we're looking at all these people involved, and I have them highlighted in there and red for you, let's pay attention to the rank because, I mean, rank matters. We're in the military, right? So we have Colonel King and Second Lieutenant Newby. Got it. What else do we have here? So we're going to look at the question because we already looked at all those answer choices. So OT Donovos from 115, can you read the question for me?
Yes, ma'am. The question reads, which two traits of effective followers did Second Lieutenant Newby best display?
Okay, well, let me correct myself that clearly I was wrong. This was not the core values lesson. However, it is interesting that some of the traits of effective followers, which you get in tomorrow's lesson, followership, you will actually find that effective followers do have core values inside them for the most part. So thank you for stating that. Which two traits of effective followers did Second Lieutenant Newby best display? All right. So important to pay attention. We're talking about Lieutenant Newby's actions. Now, in some of these more complicated scenarios, if you didn't discern which person the question was actually about, you could be led astray, right? So make sure you know that who the question refers to. And do you see the word best in there? You guys see that? It's going to mean that a couple answer choices may seem right. Best implies, okay? All right. So a couple things with trainees. Don't ask questions. Why didn't Lieutenant Newby confer with the equipment issue team? Because he didn't need to. That had nothing to do with this. Why didn't he use email to have a paper trail of the conversation? Because you don't need to make things bigger than they are, and that's reading into the scenario. And then why doesn't the inbound personnel already have cold weather gear? I have no idea. Don't read into the scenario. The scenario is what the scenario is. Don't try and extrapolate stuff because if you do, it will confuse you and you will likely choose the wrong answer. So don't do it. Just stop. All right. So if we were to take the scenario and look at the terms, just specifically as we went through the list before, did Lieutenant Newby display courage? By a show of hands, how many of you guys think that he displayed courage? And then someone can open their mic and tell me what action was courageous. Lieutenant Knox, do you have an answer for what action showed courage?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that he showed courage in standing up to Colonel King and in the sense that he really felt that they needed to continue to track the projected inbound personnel.
Right, there was a little truth to power there, right, to be cliche. Cool.
Yes,
all right, put your guys' hands down. And oh, look, we got a check mark. It's good stuff. Cool. You all agree with me, he showed courage. Got it. Did he make a decision? Anybody's hands say he made a decision? We got 5 people thinking he made a decision. 4. You putting your hands up or down? You all think 5 people think he made a decision? All right. OT Ed Mickelman, you think he made a decision. How about you tell me what decision he made?
He decided to reply to the colonel, ma'am.
He decided to reply to the colonel. I mean, he acted on it. So when we talk about decision,
he had a choice to
did he affect any change through his decision making? Yeah, don't read into some of these too much because he didn't. So making a decision usually would affect change somewhere, right? So yeah, it seems like the colonel actually made decisions if we're real honest, right? You guys agree with that? The colonel made the decisions? Because he was affecting change in other people. All right. How about did Lieutenant Newby solve a problem? And we got some hands on solving a problem? Two, three, four, five, three. We're not sure. Okay. Was there a problem yet? The way it's written, is there a problem yet? Not really.
No, man.
I think he was avoiding a problem, right? So, but he did apply some analysis, but not to actually fix the problem per se. Did he show commitment? Anybody? Hands on commitment? 5 of you. Maybe commitment to his organization, because he knows his people will have to work a little bit harder, but I don't know, not a whole lot. You know what we're going to give him? We're going to give him a little check. How about that? Did he show communication skills? Ooh, yeah, 13, 16, 20. Ooh, yeah, 30. Y'all believe he showed some communication skills. I will not argue with you about that. Sort of. We'll give him another little check. And the reason why is because this actually was kind of an in-passing conversation, right? It wasn't that he had to speak. He had to make sure that in his communication skills, multiple people were understanding of it. It wasn't like he had to really effectively communicate an idea. It wasn't like he had to explain a lot of stuff. So while you aren't wrong about him showing some communication skills, I feel like it gets a little check. We agree with a little check? All right, how about this one? Did he show flexibility? Hands? You guys keep your hands raised this whole time? What are you doing? So most of us didn't think there was no flexibility here. I mean, there wasn't really time in the conversation for him to be flexible. And he was adaptable, willing to change, willing to compromise. I mean, if he was told to, probably. But we didn't get that far, and don't think into the question. Like, don't read into it, right? So we won't give him anything there. Did he have organizational understanding? What we got for hands on this one? 8, 10, 12, 15, 19, 21, 27, 30. 30 of you. 30 of you think he showed organizational understanding. So recognizing that the second and third order effect of the inbound personnel would affect the other team, the equipment issue team, right? Because the personnel's projections, that does seem to show some kind of organizational knowledge about the interactions between the two of them, right? So one small change affected many people. That's a pretty good size check. So then we go back and we look, did those two answers come together anywhere in A, B, C, and D? Do we have courage and decision making? We did like courage, right? So if courage we liked, and that was an easy one, it's in A and D. Let's see. What options do we have? Oh, can I get some hearts on who wants A and hearts on who and smiles on who wants D? Hearts on A and smiles on D. Am I getting into some emojis here? Oh, I got a smile. Someone's smiling at me. There we are. Hearts on A and smiles on D. What are we all saying? Mostly smiles, right? How you guys feeling about that? That organizational and understanding and courage is definitely what happens here because he didn't actually ultimately make a decision. So listen, on test day, I want you to be very specific. I want you to answer every single question. If you are going to skip one, make sure that you're very succinct in your yellow sheet of annotating it on scratch paper and then coming back to it later. Go through the entire test and answer the questions that you know for sure. There is not time to use my strategy on every single question, okay? But you can use it to quickly eliminate some of those errors of your eye jumping to the first correct answer. Remember, I was talking about apple, oranges, grapes, apple, oranges, grapefruit. When you break them apart, should help you with those questions that you were unsure about. The truth of it is, you guys actually know this material pretty well. I want you to study actively, engage all of your learning centers the best that you can. Recognize that those levels of learning and those samples of behavior are actually at that lowest level of Luden's taxonomy. Don't get carried away with it, okay? Manage your time effectively during the test. Set yourself a goal. I should have 25 questions answered in the first, you have 1.5 minutes per question. You shouldn't take all 1.5 minutes. So by the 25-minute mark, I should be halfway through, giving myself closer to 1 minute per question. So set yourself some achievable goals. Ensure your bubble answer is exactly what you want it to be on your review. Also, guys, don't cram the lead through the paper. It makes Mr. Sean P. Locklear crazy. You really just need a little bit of a mark on there. And if you want to go erase, it makes it a lot easier for your exam to come out evaluated correctly. Start with those answers first that you know, and then analyze the options of the ones that are causing you a little bit more difficulty. Read the questions critically. Who is this happening to? And what really is the important takeaway noun from this stuff, like tactical, not doctrine. Only change the answers that you are 100% sure that you guys should change. And trust yourselves. Absolutely study this material. I had actually, in the last flight that we did here at the 24th, we had at least 2 trainees who scored 100 on both Academic 1 and Academic 2. So 100 both times. Very achievable. Very high average scores frequently in my flights, with 94s through 96s all over the place, with a smattering of like 86s and 88s. I have unwavering faith in you guys as long as you're giving yourselves relentless commitment in the effort to achieve your goal. I will leave this flight room open a little bit longer if anybody has any questions, but I have recorded this, and then we'll put this, once I find the recording, in your guys' flight rooms. But at the end of this, so here's what I need you guys to do. The AO from each of these flights, because I don't really know who all are my guests here, if you guys please would send my Canvas email, which I don't check very often, so it's a special request. Send my Canvas email the request to make sure that this presentation ends up in your guys' folders. And other than that, I'm going to get out of this particular stop presenting here. And I will stay open a little while later, and many of you are already leaving. Wonderful.